Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Ellen Edmondson. She is a multi award winning author, spiritual messenger, and thought leader dedicated to helping individuals reconnect with their spiritual essence and live with purpose and authenticity. Welcome to the show, Ellen.
Oh, thank you so much, AJ. I appreciate being here with you and your audience today.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show, Ellen. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about how one can live with love and authenticity in today's time. In this backdrop, we'll have our conversation. But before that, let's learn a bit more about you, your journey, your background, so that the audience knows who they are listening to.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Of course, like AJ said, I'm a multi-award winning author, and I've written a book called A Place of Love and Light, A Journey Back to Compassion, Authenticity, and Making a Positive Contribution to the World. And this book has been a labor of love for mine over 10 years. My background is before I came on into a spiritual awakening in 2013, that brought me on this path of pursuing my spiritual passions and my spiritual calling. I was a former senior executive in the federal U.S. Based in the U.S. in the U.S. federal government for 16 years. But after doing that work and as a public servant and helping people across the United States in that way, I was actually a controller. So I was very left brain. I say very logic based and oriented, but I just had this big shift where I knew I was meant to make a bigger difference and to do more. And I left that job after 16 years. And I was, like I said, I was a senior executive. So I rose up the ladder pretty quickly and I did that work, but it didn't fulfill my soul any longer. And it just got to a point that I was like, I knew I was being called to do something more and to move into a bigger purpose and just to share my gifts in a bigger way. I didn't know quite what that was, but I left my career and shifted into the spiritual path. And that's kind of how I went there. And so the book that I have written with the wisdoms and the sacred messages that are in that came out of that shift that I made and that calling that pulled me into this path.
Absolutely. Absolutely. To you, what is this spiritual path? People talk about spiritualism, spirituality, spiritual path. I want to understand from your and how do you know that this is the path that you want to take for a long time? Some people take one path in life, then they find this is not the path I wanted to take, and then there is. Do you know it is for the certain? Are you? How does one know that? There's nothing wrong with that, but how does one know that? These are difficult questions for, say, normal mortals, and that is why I'm asking from you.
Wow, that's a great question because that actually just ties into, I always love storytelling and it ties into what had happened for me. So my path, I thought I was doing the right path and went into business and I became like I said, controller, went in, got my undergraduate degree, went to college, university, and went into finance and went into business. But my heart was always more on a creative and a different higher path of wanting to help people. So that was why I went into that area. But how I knew that I needed to make that change was because it no longer resonated with my soul. And that's what I work with people as an intuition coach. And I tell everybody, we have to listen. We have to turn inward and listen to that calling that we have from within. And I know people have heard, follow your heart, but it truly is listening. Life is it's an inner journey. And what happens is we get disconnected from listening to that voice within, really getting quiet because we get taught that all of our external environment and everyone around us knows they're guiding us. And that, parents and family and people, they guide us out of love. But the key is nobody really knows what's best for you but you. And you have to turn inward and listen to that. And so that was for me, where I became disconnected from doing the work of money and power and prestige and status. I had that in my job, but it didn't fulfill my soul. And one day I just woke up and I said, I can't do this anymore. It's not feeding me. It's not making me feel whole. And I feel like I'm getting up on a grind, just going to work every day. And I quit my job. I had a mortgage, I had car payment, I had everything. I had all these bills. I was not married and I didn't have a child at the time. And I just walked away from my job. And I said, I took a leap of faith. And I said, I've always grew up with this foundation of spirituality, religion. My family was religious and my mother was a devout Catholic. So I grew up with that faith. But I just said, God, I'm going to walk away from this. I'm going to take a leap of faith and you're going to have to help make the net appear so that I land okay. And it did, it worked out. But I think when people feel that disconnect, that's when you know you're being pulled into a different direction. And I think spirituality is living your authenticity. That's really what it is. It's living that authenticity, following what really feels right for you, not others' expectations, but really connects with your soul and what you're being called to do. And I knew I was being called on this path. And that's what I encourage everybody is you've got to go take that step back. It's an inward journey to really tap into what are you being led to do? Because we're all called to bring some unique gifts to the world to help contribute to the overall tapestry of humanity.
Absolutely, absolutely, Ellen. We'll come to your book also. I just want to get your, final thoughts on some of these things. So one you talk about, connecting with inner wisdom, inner soul, inner journey. What is this inner journey about? Because this inner is always with us, and we always listen to it. Sometimes we do not listen to it. We think our brain works better, then we listen to the brain. I want to understand, is sometimes can it be that your inner journey is only full of emotions? You are looking at things very emotionally rather than diving deep into yourself. How do I know whether it's a inner journey in the right earnest, or it's only about an emotional journey about myself? Help us understand, because you talked about helping others. That's where a lot of fulfillment is.
Yes. And that really connecting into that inner journey and knowing that it's not just an emotional self, because we have to look at, we have our ego self, which I always say is the emotional self. That's really where you're doing things out of a really being about self and self-preservation, self-promotion. It's about the self. But when we talk about the inner journey that really we tap into that interconnectedness. And when we do things out of a deep desire and a connection or interconnection to help and be of service to others, and that service is always through a foundation of love, your authenticity, and that service to the greater good. That's really a distinction. It's not about just, we always want to listen to our inner voice to help promote for ourselves. We got to take care of ourselves and self-love and self-care. But we don't want to be selfish and only promote the self. We need to tap into everything. For us comes back to being an instrument of peace and love and light, and how we can contribute that for the greater good of the world. For ourselves, when I say world, I mean your immediate families, your communities, your nation, all the way out to overall humanity. We all have a place in that, and it's all from a place of positiveness and positive contribution. And when we're doing that, that's how we're putting love and light out into the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's come to your book, A Place of Love and Light, a journey back to compassion, authenticity, and making a positive contribution to the world. Do you have a copy of the book? And who is this book for?
Who is this book for? This book is for anyone who's on, any spiritual seekers who are on that path of trying to understand, why am I here? What is my purpose? Why am I here in the world at this time? What am I meant to contribute? Does my contribution even matter? This book takes all those big questions and it really boils it down into some practical spirituality and practical actions and steps for people to take that inward journey that we were just talking about and really do some self-examination and see how can I show up as my best self, my highest self, my connected, spiritually connected self, and bring that to the world. Because when I bring that to the world, I'm leaving my positive contribution and legacy to everyone. So this book is actually 10 years for 10 years of meditation that I had been doing. And in that meditation, I call that's my sacred space. And that's everybody, not just me. That's everybody's sacred space. When you turn inward every day, just take some moments of quiet or just sit in stillness. Even for me, I do walking meditations out in nature. That's one of the best things. Being out in nature connects you to the bigness of life. So when you take that time to sit in that and be present, I was started meditating in 2013, and I started actually. It's interesting because how I actually started was with Oprah and Deepak Chopra's free 21-day challenges. Do you remember those, AJ? When Oprah and Deepak Chopra started that worldwide meditations, global meditations, that's when I first tapped into it, and I actually tapped into it after my mother had passed away. 3.5 months after my son was born. And so that's when I actually had that experience of trying to understand the bigger purpose of life. What does it mean? Why are we here? Usually when people experience some kind of a trauma or experience like that or big shift in life, you go inward and you start questioning. And that's what I did. But through that meditation, I started realizing as I strengthened my spiritual connection, I didn't realize that's what I was doing, but that's what was happening. One day I had an experience where I started, as I was asking the questions, I started getting these answers coming to me. I started feeling these thoughts and impressions coming to me, and I started writing them down. And so I did that, and I eventually set up a website that I went to see somebody. It was like, I'm receiving this, I thought was just this unusual experience. But she explained to me, no, you're receiving divine guidance and you need to share this with the world. And so she encouraged me to set up a website. I started posting these writings, and I started realizing every time there was something that would happen around the world, people would go and look at these writings. And I'd see blips of people actually looking at them and getting feedback on them. So then I started posting for 10 years that way, and I finally pulled them together in a book. And that's when we have
Absolutely.
Love and Light.
Wonderful, wonderful indeed, Ellen. And so for people who would want to go into that inner journey, inner wisdom, how do they tap it every day if they want to? Is there a particular way, practical way to tap into one's inner wisdom, Ellen?
Yes, yes. And that I go back, the thing I always, when I work with folks and what I teach them, and I tell them the easiest way to start is if you can just take 5 minutes, up to 15 is great. But even if you can just start with 5 minutes of sitting in silence, of just tuning out the world, quieting the chatter in your mind, and just letting yourself sit calmly in the now, in the present, and letting yourself just be still. That's how we start to connect. We really start to connect our mind, body, and soul. And we start to actually get to feel our own selves, our own presence, our own emotions. And then we start to let that calm down and subside. And when we do that and the chatter in our mind start to subside, that's when you open that space. You start sitting in what I call our eternalness. We start sitting in that space of divine connection and guidance. And that's where we start to receive. And we can actually start to hear what's our next step. I always say that still small voice within, or intuition. That's what I call it, intuition, the still small voice within. Some people who are on the Christian path may even call it like the Holy Spirit. There's different names for it, but it's just that inner guidance that you create that opening for it to start to communicate with you. And it will always guide you to your next best step, whatever that may be. You can ask that question and you feel into it when you create that opening. But if you can sit in silence, just 5 minutes, start with 5 minutes a day. And as you learn to quiet the chatter in your mind, you're opening the space for divine guidance to come in and work with you.
Absolutely, absolutely, Ellen. Life is full of challenges. Life is not fair. Every day we wake up, we think about the challenges very few people are able to think of, uh, the gifts that God has bestowed us. Amidst all this chaos of life, how do I, as a normal person, how do I connect with, as you call, a place of love and light? How easy or how difficult is it?
It's, and I get it, because all of us we go through challenges. We have those tough moments. We all have our trials in life that test us. And the thing that we have to do is a shift in our perspective. The shift comes when you understand that the challenges that we have, even every day, the everyday to-do list, the everyday of trying to meet the bills, of trying to, understand why this is happening or that's happening, we have to tap into and know that even in those times, we're being we're being polished. So almost like a lump of coal, we're being polished. We're having that outer layer polished around us for us to understand that we're learning lessons. We're learning different ways of being in the world. But every challenge we have is calling us to be better, to step into our best self. So when you have that challenge, if you can stop and acknowledge, what am I meant to learn from this? What am I meant to take away that's going to help me to be a better person? How can I forgive in a situation where somebody has wronged me? And maybe it doesn't necessarily mean you have to say that what they did was right, but just for you, you're creating that space in yourself to say, I forgive this person, because every single individual walking the face of the earth has something to offer, and every situation has something to offer us to learn from. But what we have to do is take it and say, and look at it in that way, a great life lesson. What do I learn from this? And how do I help me make this to make me better and not bitter? How do I help it? How do I use this to change my perspective on how I move through the world? And it's not easy when you've lost loved ones, when you can't meet bills, when you have different challenges going on. But I always say, just remember this too shall pass. And we have to go through the challenging times in order to appreciate the good times better. And I don't care how challenging a time may be, there's always some kind of light, there's always some kind of opening that's breaking through to help us to be better. So we can't learn to be courageous if we're not put in situations to have courage. We can't appreciate the power of forgiveness if we're not put in situations where we have to forgive or have to have courage. So we're growing and evolving. And if we can all remember that every single one of us is God's beautiful work in progress, that nobody's perfect, nobody's meant to be perfect, no situation is going to be perfect, but our perfection comes in how we move through it, how we embrace the best of ourselves and each other, and try and keep that positive outlook, because that's going to elevate us to be more in line with our divine selves and move through life with that greater appreciation, gratitude and appreciation. So it's hard, but if you can every day just take, at the end of your day, just take 5 minutes and write 3 things you're grateful for that came out of that day. That's the light. What are 3 places of light you found in that day? And when you can spot the opportunities of light, you've spotted your connection where divine love is working in your life, even through the challenges.
Absolutely, absolutely, Ellen. In terms of using compassion, authenticity in a business setting and work setting, how do we apply that? Those are different places. We got to be our very strong self, because we are there to make some money for bringing food to our to our table. How do we apply compassion and authenticity there?
Great. I love that question, AJ, because I came up in the business world for 16 years. I was in the federal government. I went from a frontline employee all the way up to senior executive in a short period of time. And that was something I had to learn. And what I found was, even in the challenging times when you're being, organizational politics, when you're being tested, when you're expected to go in the room and be tough, or, you're dealing with a tough boss, you can always reach for compassion by reaching for the most loving solution in that moment. So is it to think negative? Is it to gossip about that person? Is it to put them down? Is it to, no, it's not. For you, you have to stay connected to that best part of yourself. So maybe it's not saying anything at all. Maybe it's in your mind sending a silent prayer or a silent blessing that, you know what? Hurting people hurt people, or difficult people are probably going through some difficulties. And what they're doing is pushing that out and putting on, striking out, to others, lashing out to others. So the best thing that you can do is be that compassionate part of yourself, reach for the best solution. And that's what I was always challenged in that way. And that's what I always had to do. So I didn't stoop down to meet negativity or to meet anything that was less than bringing my best in a positive way. I didn't meet that, because when you go low to meet somebody else's lows, you've disconnected from that part of yourself that's really your divine self and your highest self. So always reach for that and stay true to yourself. You don't have to sell your soul. I looked at, when I left my job, I said I wasn't going to sell my soul for my work. It didn't resonate with me anymore. For me, I left. But even in situations that don't resonate with me, I was not afraid to say, this doesn't feel right for me at this time, and I'm not going to do this, but I can offer another solution. So you always show up and let people see. When you show up as your authentic self, you live in no regrets. You have no regrets. You're going to know that you did the best and you offered the best. And if it can't be accepted, then you have to turn inward and say, what's best for me? So all you can do is bring your best self and show up. And if people can't accept that, you say what's best for you. And then that's when you listen to your divine guidance to take you in the direction that you're meant to. But it's not hard to show up with compassion and authenticity. When you do, you give other people permission to show up and be compassionate and authentic as well, because we all are points of light for each other, and we're all showing each other the way. And so that's why in the business world, you can do that. Don't be afraid to show up as your positive, compassionate light. And you'll be amazed at how sometimes that can change others when you stand your ground for truth and compassion and the right way of doing things.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is much to learn from you, Ellen, about so many of these things, about love and light, about compassion, authenticity, and making a positive contribution to the world. So, for those people who would like to connect with you, learn more from you, about you, be a part of what you are doing, what's the best way for them to do so?
I would say go to my website, because it has everything listed on there, my social media handles. It gives more information about what I offer to people with my coaching and services. And so my website is my name, ellenedmondson.com. But that's the best place. And I love connecting with people. So I love connecting with anybody who would like to reach out.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
And thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure being here and holding space with you and your audience.